For years, the world has spoken of Iran in the language of fear, conflict, sanctions, suspicion, unrest. And after hearing those words repeated long enough, many people came to believe they knew the country already. But age has a way of teaching you that places judged from afar are rarely understood at all. Because Iran is not only a land of tension, it is also a land of blue domes and ancient palaces of desert silence and mountain snow of crowded bazaars, and old poetry of beauty so strange and luminous it feels as though it has stepped out of 1001 Nights. This is one of the oldest civilizations on Earth, where history has never truly vanished. It still lives in the stones, in the gardens, in the rhythm of daily life, and in the pride of a people carrying memory across centuries. So, tonight, let us set aside the noise of the headlines and begin again, looking not at the Iran we were told to fear, but at the Iran the world forgot to see. Tehran, the pulse of a modern Iran the world rarely sees. Since we are to begin seeing Iran differently, then there is no better place to continue than Tehran. Because whatever assumptions the outside world may carry about this country, they begin to loosen here in the capital, where Iran reveals one of its most unexpected faces. Tehran does not greet you like an ancient postcard preserved behind glass. It arrives with movement, with traffic, with noise, with urgency. It is a city that breathes fast. A city of millions, restless and layered, stretching wide beneath the long white shoulders of the Zagros Mountains. And that perhaps is the first surprise. Tehran is a city where mountain snow and dry urban haze can exist in the very same frame. On a clear day, the peaks rise above the city like a painted backdrop too dramatic to be real, their snow catching the light while the streets below pulse with heat engines and hurried footsteps. It is a contrast that tells you something essential about Iran itself. This is not a country of one texture, one rhythm, or one identity. Even here, in its capital, opposites live side by side. Nowhere is that more visible than at Azadi Tower, the graceful monument that has become one of Tehran's defining symbols. It stands with a kind of quiet dignity, neither entirely ancient nor entirely modern, but suspended somewhere between the two. Its sweeping lines draw from older Persian forms, echoing the arches and symmetry of empires long gone, while its clean silhouette still feels unmistakably contemporary. Seen from a distance, it seems almost ceremonial, as though it were less a tower than a gateway, an invitation into a country the world has too often mistaken for something simpler than it is. In many ways, Azadi says what Iran itself has been trying to say all along: there is more than one face here. But Tehran does not live on monuments alone. To understand its soul, you must step beyond the broad avenues and official facades and enter the older heart of the city, where history is not displayed so much as inhabited. That heart beats inside Golestan Palace. Here behind ornate walls and elegant courtyards, the Qajar era still lingers in shimmering detail. Mirrorwork catches the light in 1,000 fractured reflections. Colored tiles bloom with intricate patterns. Painted halls and carved surfaces speak of royal taste ceremony and a world once shaped by refinement as much as power. It is easy standing there to forget the modern capital just outside. For a moment, Tehran feels less like a political center and more like a keeper of memory, one that has guarded beauty through upheaval, dynasty, and time. If palaces preserve the elegance of old Persia, the bazaar preserves its pulse. You can almost follow Tehran by its sounds here: the murmur of bargaining, the scrape of shutters, the shuffle of feet through narrow corridors lined with textiles, copper spices, gold, and carpets dense with pattern and history. The air seems to carry everything at once: the scent of saffron dust, tea leather, and warm bread. This is not a museum of commerce. It is living continuity. A reminder that Iran's old marketplaces were never merely places to buy and sell. They were places to meet, to argue, to exchange news, to sustain the fabric of daily life. And yet, Tehran refuses to remain only in its past. That may be what makes it so compelling. Beyond the old bazaars and royal compounds lies another city altogether, one of cafes, galleries, bookstores, apartment towers, tech offices, and busy streets where young Iranians move through the day with style, ambition, and unmistakable modern energy. In its more contemporary neighborhoods, the mood shifts. You see fashion shaped by both custom and individuality. You feel the rhythm of a city thinking ahead, adapting, negotiating, reinventing. There is conversation here, curiosity here, a sense of cultural motion that rarely fits the rigid image so often projected onto Iran from abroad. That is what makes Tehran such an important beginning. It does not allow easy conclusions. It is too alive for that, too contradictory, too human. It is stern in one moment, and warm in the next, formal, from afar yet intimate when entered. It holds imperial memory, commercial instinct, artistic beauty, and urban modernity, all within the same restless body. And once you have seen that, once you have seen snowy mountains behind highways, palace mirrors behind city walls, ancient bazaars beside the pulse of contemporary life, you begin to understand that Iran was never frozen in the past. It was always more dynamic, more layered, and more alive than the world was prepared to notice. So, before we journey deeper into Persia's older stones and grander memories, Tehran leaves us with a necessary truth. Iran is not standing still. It is carrying its past forward. The Persian Empire, the civilization that once shaped the world. And if Tehran reminds us that Iran has never stood still, then the next question is impossible to avoid. How far back does this story really go? The answer takes us beyond the modern capital, beyond the crowded streets and palace walls, into a past so vast that it still shapes the identity of this land today. Because Iran was not born at the edges of history. It stood near the center of it. Long before the modern world drew its borders, long before many nations had even taken form, this was the heart of Persia, home to one of the great civilizations of the ancient world. At the beginning of that story stands Cyrus the Great. His name has traveled across centuries, not simply because he conquered, but because he built. In the 6th century before Christ, Cyrus founded the Achaemenid Empire, a realm that expanded across an astonishing sweep of land, linking peoples, languages, and traditions under a single imperial vision. But what made Persia remarkable was not power alone. It was the way that power was imagined. Cyrus came to be remembered not only as a king of armies, but as a ruler associated with order, tolerance, and a rare understanding that an empire could endure not merely through force, but through structure, respect, and restraint. That is part of what made ancient Persia so formidable. It was not simply a kingdom that grew large. It was a civilization that learned how to govern vastness. And nowhere does that vision become more visible than at Persepolis. Even in ruins, Persepolis does not feel small. It rises from the earth with the stillness of something that once expected to outlast time itself. Built as a ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid Empire, it was never just a city in the ordinary sense. It was a stage for kingship, a place where imperial power could be seen felt and performed in stone. To approach it is to climb toward a world designed to humble the eye. Broad stairways lead upward with deliberate majesty. Massive columns, though, broken now, still suggest the scale of halls that once shimmered with royal presence. Every surface seems to carry intention. And then there are the reliefs. Along the staircases and walls, carved figures move in quiet procession delegations from across the empire, each rendered with dignity, each bringing tribute, each marked by different clothing, different gifts, different features. It is one of the most striking images ancient Persia left behind, not chaos, not plunder, but order. A gathering of many peoples beneath one imperial roof. Whether idealized or not, the message is unmistakable. Persia saw itself not only as powerful, but as a world brought into arrangement. Standing there, you do not just look at history. You feel the psychology of empire, the need to turn authority into architecture to make stone speak the language of permanence. Yet Persepolis is only part of the story. Not far away lies Naqsh-e Rustam, where the mountain itself becomes a monument. Here, the royal tombs of Persian kings are cut high into the face of the cliff, immense and solemn, as though the dead were placed not beneath the earth, but into the body of time itself. The facades, carved in the shape of vast crosses, seem almost suspended above the desert plain. From below, they feel remote and commanding, too high for intimacy, made instead for awe. There is something deeply moving about the place. Not because it is ornate, but because it is severe. These are not graves that ask to be admired. They ask to be remembered. That, perhaps, is the true scale of Persia's legacy. It was not a passing kingdom. It was one of the civilizations that taught the ancient world what empire could look like, how roads, administration ceremony, and political imagination could bind immense distances together. Its influence echoed far beyond its own borders and far beyond its own age. To speak of Iran, then, without Persia, would be to speak only in fragments. Because the memory of that empire is not sealed away in textbooks or ruined stone. It still lives in the cultural confidence of the country, in its historical consciousness, in the quiet certainty that this land was once more than a place on the map. It was a center of gravity. When you stand among the columns of Persepolis or beneath the cliff tombs of Naqsh-e Rustam, the truth no longer feels abstract. You can see it. You can almost hear it in the wind moving through broken stone. Iran is not simply the heir to a troubled modern history. It is the keeper of an ancient one. Northern Iran, the green world, beyond the desert. If the stone grandeur of ancient Persia reveals how deep Iran's history runs, the country's northern edge reveals something else entirely: how quickly Iran can overturn everything you thought you knew about it. For many people outside the region, Iran exists in the imagination as a land of heat and dust of ochre hills, desert winds and dry horizons stretching into silence. And yes, that Iran exists. But it is not the whole picture. Travel north toward the Caspian Sea, and the country begins to change before your eyes. The air grows softer. The earth darkens. The mountains catch the clouds. And little by little, the familiar image of a harsh, sun-beaten Middle East gives way to something greener, wetter, and almost improbable. This is one of Iran's great surprises. Along the Caspian coast, the landscape feels as though it belongs to another world. Forested slopes descend toward fertile plains. Mist settles over hillsides in the early morning. Rain hangs in the air. Villages appear between folds of green, their roofs half hidden beneath trees. Roads bend through dense woodland and open suddenly onto tea fields, rice paddies and orchards that seem to glow under the softer northern light. It is a gentler palette here: deep green, silver fog, wet soil, pale sky. And for anyone who has only imagined Iran as a place of stone and sand, the effect can be quietly astonishing. At the heart of this region are the Hyrcanian forests, one of the oldest forest ecosystems in this part of the world. There is something primordial about them, as though they belong not only to geography, but to time itself. The trees rise thick and close their trunks, dark with moisture, their canopies layered in shifting shades of green. Ferns spread across the forest floor. Trails vanish into shade. In certain places, the silence feels ancient, broken only by water wind and the rustle of leaves. These are not decorative woods at the edge of civilization. They are living remnants of a much older natural world survivors from ages that have long since disappeared elsewhere. and in that sense, northern Iran mirrors the country's history. Just as Persia preserved the memory of an ancient civilization, these forests preserve the memory of an ancient landscape. The north is also one of the places where Iran's biodiversity reveals itself most vividly. In its mountains and forests live creatures as elusive and storied as the land itself, including the Persian leopard, moving like a shadow through remote terrain. Along the Caspian, rare seals and migratory birds remind us that this is not merely a scenic corner of the country, but an ecological crossroads shaped by water weather and seasonal passage. Life gathers here differently. It lingers, nests, hides, returns. But perhaps what makes northern Iran so unforgettable is not any single species or forest alone. It is the feeling of contradiction resolved into beauty. The same country that gives you desert cities and imperial ruins also gives you rain-soaked roads, green hills and villages wrapped in fog. The same Iran that rises in the mind as arid and severe can in the north feel almost lush enough to be dreamlike. And that matters because by now a pattern is beginning to emerge. Iran is not a place of one face, one climate, one story. It is a country that keeps unfolding layer after layer, each one challenging the last. First, the capital unsettled the stereotype. Then, the ruins of Persia widened the scale of history. And now, the northern forests do something simpler, but no less powerful. They remind us that even nature has conspired to make Iran far more varied, far more beautiful, and far less predictable than the world has been taught to expect. Beyond the headlines, beyond the ruins, beyond the desert, another Iran has been waiting in the rain. The Zagros Mountains, Iran's stone backbone, and the lasting spirit of nomadic life. From the rain-soaked north, Iran turns once again into something more rugged, more elemental, and far more severe. The softness of the Caspian landscape begins to fall away, replaced by a world of broken ridges, deep valleys and mountain walls that seem to run endlessly across the horizon. Here, the land feels older, barer, and closer to its bones. This is the Zagros Mountains, one of the great natural structures of Iran, and in many ways one of the great keys to understanding the country itself. Stretching across western Iran, the Zagros form a vast stone backbone, shaping climate, settlement movement, and memory. Their beauty is not delicate. It is stern wind-carved and full of weight. Sunlight strikes the ridgelines in bronze and grey. Valleys open suddenly beneath steep slopes. Distance seems to harden into silence. In places like this, the landscape does not simply surround human life. It tests it, defines it, and remains always larger than it. Yet the Zagros are not only a geography of rock and height. They are also a human world, one that carries some of Iran's oldest living traditions. Because here among these harsh and magnificent mountains, nomadic life never truly vanished. Among the most well-known of these communities are the Bakhtiari, whose lives have long been tied to the rhythms of the range. For generations, they have moved with the seasons guiding flocks across difficult terrain between summer highlands and winter pastures. It is a way of life shaped not by convenience, but by land itself, by altitude, water, weathergrass, and the accumulated knowledge of people who have learned how to live in conversation with the mountains. To picture that migration is to picture something both practical and deeply poetic. Long lines of people and animals moving across steep ground. Temporary camps rising against vast open skies. Paths worn not by asphalt but by memory. This is not a performance of tradition. It is tradition still in motion. A living pattern of endurance, labor, and belonging. That is what gives the Zagros such emotional force. In many parts of the modern world, old ways of life survive mostly as symbols. Here, they still survive as reality. The tents, the herds, the seasonal movement, the family bonds, the mountain knowledge passed from one generation to the next, these are not museum pieces. They are part of the present. With that continuity comes a culture still rich with its own visual and emotional language. Bakhtiari clothing, woven textiles, musical traditions, and communal customs all carry the imprint of a people shaped by movement and terrain. The patterns are bold. The colors are distinct. The songs seem to belong to the open air. Even the smallest details feel rooted in place, as though the mountains themselves had found expression in fabric, sound, and ritual. What emerges here is a different image of Iran, one far removed from politics headlines or monumental ruins. The Zagros remind us that this country is not only the heir to empires and cities. It is also a land of communities whose identity has remained intimately tied to earth, weather, stone, and survival. In these mountains, culture is not abstract. It is carried on the back, worn on the body, sung at night, and walked across the land. By now, a fuller Iran is beginning to take shape. Not a single story, but many. Not one landscape, but several. A modern capital beneath snowy peaks. Ancient imperial ruins rising from the plain. Green forests along the Caspian. And here in the Zagros, a more enduring human thread, resilient, proud, and astonishingly close to the natural world. In these mountains, Iran feels less like a place being explained, and more like a civilization still breathing through its people. Kashan and Isfahan, cities that feel borrowed from a Persian dream. From the rough strength of the Zagros, the journey turns toward another face of Iran, one shaped not by migration or mountain stone, but by elegance, symmetry, and the quiet confidence of a civilization that understood beauty as a way of life. Kashan is where that beauty begins to gather itself. At first glance, a desert city might suggest severity, restraint, even emptiness. But Kashan tells a different story. Behind modest walls and sun-worn exteriors lie some of the most refined interiors in Iran, old merchant and aristocratic homes built around shaded courtyards, still pools of water-stained glass, carved plaster and rooms arranged with a sense of grace that feels almost musical. Nothing is accidental here. Every arch, every lattice, every patch of shade seems to have been placed with care. What makes Kashan so remarkable is that its beauty is inseparable from intelligence. These houses were not built only to impress. They were built to survive the desert with dignity. Thick walls softened the heat. Sunken courtyards created cooler air. Breezes were guided through interior spaces with an understanding of climate that feels astonishing even now. In Kashan, Persian architecture does not merely decorate life, it studies it. It responds to light, wind, and silence. It turns necessity into art. That is what gives the city its particular magic. The desert is always there just beyond the walls, but inside these homes, the world becomes calm enclosed, almost dreamlike. Water shimmers in central pools. Shadows shift across tiled surfaces. A single tree in a courtyard can feel like a gesture of mercy. It is the kind of beauty that does not shout. It invites you inward. Not far from Kashan, even time itself seems to take on colour in the village of Abiyane. Set against the slopes, its red clay houses rise in layers, as though the hillside and the settlement had been shaped from the same earth. There is something strikingly intimate about it. Narrow lanes, old textures, traditional dress, a sense that the centuries have not disappeared so much as settled gently into the present. It feels less like a preserved site than a memory still being lived. Then comes Isfahan. For centuries, people have called it half the world, and standing there, it is easy to understand why. Isfahan does not merely display Persian urban beauty, it seems to gather all of its finest elements and hold them in balance. The city opens outward in grand gestures, but never loses its human scale. Its beauty is monumental, yes, but never cold. At the center of that beauty is Naqsh-e Square, one of the great public spaces of the world. It is vast but not empty, formal but full of life. Around it rise mosques, palaces, arcades and market entrances, arranged with such harmony that the whole space feels composed rather than built. The blue domes lift into the sky with a softness that almost seems weightless. Tilework glows with patterns so intricate they seem to move when the light changes. Calligraphy flows across walls like thought made visible. In Isfahan, architecture does not simply occupy space. It creates atmosphere. And then there are the bridges. In many places, a bridge is only a way across. In Isfahan, it becomes something more human than that. The old bridges are places to linger, to meet, to sit in the fading light, to let the city gather around you. Beneath the arches, voices rise in conversation and song. The stone holds sound in a way that makes even an ordinary evening feel touched by poetry. It is in moments like these that Iran reveals one of its most overlooked truths. Grandeur and intimacy are not opposites here. They live side by side. Kashan refines the desert into elegance. Isfahan turns urban design into wonder. Together, they show a Persia that feels almost impossible in its beauty, yet fully real, fully lived, and still standing. This is not fantasy. It only feels that way because so few were ever taught to imagine Iran like this. Yazd and Shiraz, sacred fire poetry and the soul of Persia. By the time the journey reaches Yazd and Shiraz, Iran begins to feel less like a country you are merely traveling through, and more like a civilization revealing its inner life. The grandeur is still there, the beauty is still there, but now it grows quieter, deeper, more intimate. Here, what defines the landscape is not only what you see, but what you feel lingering beneath it. Faith, memory, light, and the long afterglow of Persian thought. Yazd rises from the desert like something shaped by patience. Its mud brick skyline seems to grow out of the earth itself, almost the same color as the sand and sun around it. Narrow alleyways twist through the old city walls, leaning close shadows stretching across the ground. Roof lines connect and overlap until the whole place feels less like a collection of buildings and more like one continuous organism breathing slowly beneath the desert sky. And above it all stand the wind catchers. These tall, quiet towers are among the most elegant inventions of Persian architecture structures, designed to pull moving air down into homes and cool them long before modern technology ever could. In Yazd, survival was never separated from imagination. The city learned how to live with heat, with dust, with harshness, and somehow turn that adaptation into beauty. But Yazd carries something older still. This is one of the spiritual centers of Zoroastrianism, the ancient pre-Islamic faith of Persia, and that inheritance still gives the city a special kind of gravity. The sacred fire kept burning in its temples feels like more than ritual. It feels like continuity itself, an ember of the ancient world still alive inside the present. In Yazd, Iran becomes layered in the clearest possible way. Old beliefs were not erased here. They were absorbed into the long, complicated life of the land. Then the mood shifts and Shiraz opens like a softer note in the same song. If Yazd feels elemental earth wind flame, Shiraz feels lyrical. This is the city of gardens, roses, poetry, and emotional lightness, a place where Persian culture seems to exhale. For centuries, Shiraz has been associated with poets, with beauty, with refinement of feeling. It is not difficult to understand why. There is a gentleness to the city, as though language itself has been softened by flowers and memory. That gentleness reaches its most unforgettable form inside the Nasir al-Mulk Mosque. In the morning, light-colored glass begins to scatter across the interior, and suddenly the building no longer feels solid at all. It becomes radiant walls, carpets, columns, and air itself washed in red, blue, gold, and violet. It is one of those rare places where architecture seems to dissolve into pure atmosphere. Light is not entering the space. It is transforming it. And perhaps that is what Yazd and Shiraz reveal together, that the soul of Iran does not live only in power or monument, but in the ways its people have given meaning to heat, to faith, to beauty, and to light. Here, Persia feels less like history. It feels like spirit. The people of Iran, hospitality, pride, and a country too deep for stereotypes. In the end, no country is remembered only by its monuments. Not by its palaces, not by its mountains, not even by the weight of its history. A country is remembered by the feeling people leave behind. And in Iran, that feeling is often the same one travelers speak of again and again: warmth. For all the distance that politics has placed between Iran and the outside world, the human experience of the country has often told a different story. Again and again, what surprises visitors most is not only the beauty of the land, but the openness of the people. A conversation begins easily. A question becomes an invitation. A stranger becomes a host. In Iran, hospitality is not a performance of politeness. It feels older than that, deeper than that, something woven into the social fabric itself. There is also a quiet but unmistakable pride here. Not arrogance, but cultural confidence. Iranians know they come from one of the world's great civilizations, and that awareness lives close to the surface. You feel it in the way history is spoken of, in the love for poetry, in the care given to food, architecture, music, and language. Persia is not simply remembered here. It is carried. And that cultural memory does not survive only in museums or heritage sites. It lives in ordinary life. In the patterns of a hand-woven carpet. In the curve of calligraphy. In ceramics, in miniature art, in the sound of traditional music, in verses of Hafez or Rumi, spoken not as distant literature, but as something still emotionally near. In Iran, art is not sealed off from daily existence. It lingers in homes, in gestures, in conversation, in the way beauty is still given a place at the table. That is why Iran resists simplification so completely. It is not one thing and never was. It is modern and ancient, urban and tribal green, and desert ceremonial and intimate. It holds imperial ruins, mountain migrations, sacred fire temples, bustling bazaars, and cities that seem to shimmer between history and myth. The more closely you look, the less it fits inside any narrow frame. Perhaps that is the truest thing one can say about Iran. It is a country the world has tried to summarize too quickly. But Iran does not reveal itself in headlines. It reveals itself in layers through landscape memory beauty, and above all, through people whose dignity and generosity give the country its most human face. And once you have seen that face, the old stereotypes begin to fall away. More than a destination, a forgotten awakening. For too long, the world has looked at Iran through the fog of fear, and in doing so, it has missed something extraordinary. Beyond the headlines lies a country of immense beauty, ancient memory, and living cultural depth. A land of blue domes, desert cities, green forests, mountain tribes, sacred fire poetry, and people whose warmth outlasts every cliché. Iran is not simply a place to visit. It is a place that challenges the way we see. It reminds us that some of the world's most misunderstood lands are also the most rewarding to rediscover. So perhaps Iran is not just a destination at all. Perhaps it is something rarer, a forgotten chapter of human civilization still open, still breathing, still waiting to be read with clearer eyes.